What's up, interpreters? I'm Liz Lee, Vice President of Programs and Development at CyArk.
What's up, interpreters? My name is John Ristevski. I'm also with CyArk. I am the CEO and chairman.
What is up, interpreters? I am Paul Caputo, Executive Director for NAI.
What's up, interpreters? This is Heather, your Corporate Engagements and Partnerships Manager at NAI, and welcome, CyArk. Thank you for being here. You are commercial members of NAI, for one. You're also our platinum sponsor this year at the National Conference in St. Augustine, Florida, December 3rd through the 7th. Registration's still going on. And thank you for being here. I think specifically we're going to talk about your the Tapestry platform, but if you don't mind just giving a little bit of background about your company. I'm not super technologically savvy, so when I look at the 3D modeling that comes into play and then the virtual stuff that comes into play, it kind of blows my mind. So if someone could give maybe an elevator speech about what you do and who you are.
We're a nonprofit located ostensibly in the San Francisco Bay Area, although we went remote during the pandemic and we're now all over the place. So our mission is to unlock the power of 3D technology and to make the world's cultural heritage accessible to new audiences and future generations. So we've been in operation since 2003. And we started with an exploration of like how to apply 3D digitization technologies to cultural heritage and to create an archive of data from sites around the world that were endangered. So our mission has evolved over the years. And so now we do a variety of things with that data. So we collect it using photogrammetry, LiDAR, and a host of technologies in between to create photorealistic meshes of places. And then we utilize that data to solve a whole bunch of problems, from anything from conservation and restoration problems at sites, and to the stuff we're talking about today, which is more about storytelling and celebrating places.
I'll just add in that, part of the reason we wanted to sponsor and get more involved with NAI is that we've been doing a lot of projects that rely heavily on partnering and working very closely with interpreters to use that underlying 3D data as a canvas to tell interesting stories about places. And we use a lot of the interpretation process to create these experiences, and just want more people within the community to know about this work that we're doing, and hopefully have the chance to work together.
One of the things that is always sort of fascinates me when you talk about interpretive organizations using technology is walking that line between how amazing the technology is and the access it gives us, the barriers that it reduces to these amazing places, versus the sort of whiz bang gee whiz, the medium being the message, right? Like, so how do you walk that line between focusing on interpretation and yet using this amazing technology at the same time?
Yeah, I think we've as John said, we've been doing this for over 20 years at this point, and I think when we got started, the technology was the centerpiece. It was all whiz bang and look what we can do. I think as we've gotten deeper into the kind of interpretation and the storytelling, it's flipped our whole process in that we're really a story first approach on these projects now. And so we talk about, what is it that we want to communicate, and how do we use the technology to do that? And so that really has led to the creation of our Tapestry platform as a way to tell really rich stories about place that leverages the technology, but really as more of a backdrop to the stories being told. So the technology lets us provide you with new perspectives and see the site from a whole new angle, go places where maybe you can't even go in person, and then also pulls in, multiple voices, perspectives within that experience. So you can hear from a historian or an interpreter, but you could also hear from a community member about their connections to that place, the kind of experiences that might actually be really hard to replicate on site.
Was there one particular project that flipped the script a little bit and from from sort of the focus on the whiz bang technology to the, oh, we need to tell these stories in a different way. Was there one particular project that did that, or was that just sort of an evolution?
I think it's been more of an evolution. Like I think we've become, yeah, as Liz kind of mentioned before, I think we've definitely been focused on developing technology and learning how to utilize it and leverage it. And I think having like partners in mind first in terms of like what they need out of the resources that we're creating, and also thinking about the users and the viewers of these stories on the Tapestry platform, like what they get out of it as well. So I think ultimately, I think it's a more like user-centric kind of focus, which is like, well, what does the end product look like, and is it an enjoyable and interesting story to experience and navigate? I think that's what I think in the end drives us to make better tapestries.
Looking at your website, just sort of noodling around and seeing which of the virtual tours are available. There's the cliff dwellings in Mesa Verde. There's rock cut marvel of India's ancient past, Mongolia. So it's amazing, like the sort of scope of this, right? Like, and the opportunity to see these different places. Roughly half of these virtual tours that are up there have a little banner on them that say community made. What is community made?
Yeah, that's a program that's a newer iteration of this, in that we work really closely with communities to actually do the 3D data captures. So we do training workshops, and they get a kit and skills to be able to do that capture piece. And then they are also developing the story through interpretive workshops that we run with them. So it's a little bit different because it's really from the community members, as opposed to it being a fully kind of CyArk produced experience. So what you get is a really interesting slice and presentation of these places, from a unique perspective. So, you highlighted the Mongolian one. That was done by a local NGO there, who were primarily filmmakers, and they had a very different approach to telling the story of that site than if we had worked with, historians in that region. And so it's been a really interesting way to kind of democratize a lot of this technology, and also pull in voices that maybe have not been traditionally part of that dominant narrative for these places. So really trying to present this diversity of experiences and connections to place.
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking our language of, as far as our Jedi mission and NAI, justice, equity, diversity, accessibility, and inclusion. We talk about it all the time, how we want interpreters to kind of represent the community and the story to represent the community. John, you were talking earlier about the users and the user experience. How do you know who your users are, and then how do you get that feedback from them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do have some analytics built into the platform, so we can understand in terms of like, how long they've been using the experience, what maybe to some level what particular parts of the experience that they utilized. There's also a questionnaire at the end of each experience, which asks some questions about how they found it, what their motivation was for taking the tour, whether they liked it or not. So I think we're starting to learn more and more about who that user base is. And I think it varies depending on the particular tapestry, and how it's kind of like celebrated and shared by the partner. But we do have kind of, yeah, two pillars of information: the kind of analytics built into the platform, and that survey at the end, which kind of gives us a nice picture of who that user is, and who, a little bit about who they are and how they use the platform.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things that we've noted is that, there's a good percentage. I think right now it's about 35% of those users are actually engaging with this content as part of like a classroom activity. So we see these experiences being used a lot by teachers as part of like a pre-visit maybe that they're having from the site, when we work with interpreters, whether it's state parks or national parks. Often their education team gets plugged into this because they will send out the experience to the classroom maybe before they're coming out to the site as a really great pre-visit or again a post-visit that they can access that experience afterwards. Or for students that they're not going to be able to reach because it's not a local site for them and can't get out there on a field trip, this becomes really a wonderful resource to bring those teachings into the classroom. So for some of the parks that we've worked with, the interpretation team is really excited about being able to record these experiences and have this as kind of an ongoing resource, especially when they can't, get out to the school kids. This is a way to bring the school kids to the park, regardless of their geography.
One of the things that is clearly important to you all as an organization is providing access to places that you might not otherwise be able to go, either because it's too far away or you're just maybe just not allowed to go to those places. One of the other things you provide access to is the data that you have been collecting. What is your philosophy there on providing open access to the data that you are collecting?
I think where possible, we love to be able to share it and have communities reuse it. So a few years ago, about 5 years ago, we initiated a project called Open Heritage 3D with a few partners that were also interested in sharing their data with the broader audience. So I think at CyArk, over the 20 years or so that we've been in existence, I think we've collected maybe 300 data sets of different sites across the globe. And rather than us just sitting on that archive, I think it's kind of essential that we open it up and make that available for reuse, for research, for education, for other non-commercial uses. And so we do that wherever we can. Obviously, it's in consultation with the site partner and what their goals are for the data that's captured. Obviously, sometimes that's not possible to share it, or it's not appropriate to share it. So there are certain instances where that's not available for reuse. But I think at least as an organization, we love to see it shared more broadly so that people can get more utility out of that data than we did in the original purpose.
I'm also looking around your website, and one of the terms is terrestrial photogrammetry. Can you tell me what that is, please?
Yeah, so photogrammetry is a technique to create 3D data from a series of photographs. And so that's basically what photogrammetry is. So you take a series of basically overlapping photographs, and you can determine from that the position of the camera. And once you have the position of the cameras, you can then triangulate points in the scene using the pixels in the images. So that's essentially what photogrammetry is. And terrestrial photogrammetry just means photogrammetry taken from the ground. So either
thank you.
DSLR camera on a tripod, or maybe one in your hand, versus say aerial photogrammetry, which is maybe drone based or plane based.
And this is all to get to build a 3D model at some point, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And that's how we combine a different bunch of technologies to do that, like from photogrammetry and usually primarily photogrammetry and LiDAR, which is the laser-based system for creating 3D models.
You all have talked a lot about partnerships and community, and so you sound a lot like a nonprofit, but I'm kind of curious, you're set up as a nonprofit, and has that always been since 2003?
We were originally part of another foundation called the Kassira Family Foundation. So our founder, Ben Kassira, he and his wife started a family foundation. And so this was an initiative, a project of theirs. And then I believe in 2008, Liz, that we became our own 501c3. So we were not our own entity for the entire 20 years. We were kind of a project embedded within another organization, but since 2008, we've been a standalone 501c3.
And I think, you brought up a good point, Heather. I think some people get confused about that because we are, a lot of our work is service-based work. So we, there are different types of revenue that you could have as a nonprofit. You could rely solely on charitable donations. You could also do what a lot of organizations call program service revenue. And so, our mission is to use 3D technologies to empower, connections to these places. And so we take on projects that kind of fit within that. So, all the experiences are freely available to the public. John just talked about our, the open access to the data that we provide. And so although many of our work, many of our projects are, we may get hired by a group to do this, that those are kind of core tenets of our mission to make sure that we're still providing a broad public benefit.
You've worked in so many communities around the world, and we talked about the community-made tapestry projects that you have, but in general, not just the community-made ones, but all of the projects that you work on. What steps do you take to ensure that the local community members are the folks whose voices are heard, and those are the stories that are being told?
No, I think that's a great question. And I think some of this actually gets back to the way that we work, is that oftentimes those are our primary stakeholders that they're either driving this project from a both funding perspective and access, or maybe there is a third party that is funding it. But those local communities are essential in terms of being able to tell the story of the site accurately and in a respectful way. So that consultation and community engagement starts right at the beginning of the project. So working with them to identify the narratives that they want to include as part of the experience. Also identifying, I mentioned these other interviews, or what we call voices within the experience. And that's a real opportunity, I think, within the platform to bring in voices that have maybe not been part of the dominant narrative. We did a project at Mesa Verde National Park, and there's this beautiful tapestry of Cliff Palace. And one of the things that the park really wanted to do was bring in indigenous perspectives, which are not always present in the narrative of this place, which is a sacred site and connected to 26 tribal communities in the United States today. And so within that experience, you get to hear from a park archaeologist, but you also get to hear from 3 different members of tribal communities with connections to that place. And so, they were involved in that whole kind of storyboarding and initial inception of that project, all the way through to that end experience where you get to hear from these people directly.
Where did interpretation come into the mix?
I think that we have the benefit of having a great team. And so I'm going to give some credit to one of our teammates, Whitney Peterson, came to us from the National Park Service, and she was an interpreter there. And as we got deeper into developing these experiences, she said, "Hey, there's this known process. We can draw on some of these existing principles," and that really helped shape our own process. This merging of kind of traditional interpretive principles within this virtual and technical medium that we have, to say, okay, yeah, how can we marry these two kind of disciplines to create a really unique platform and experience for people.
And this was before Tapestry.
Yeah, I think some of our, it's starting to think how we can adopt some of these concepts, and we experimented a lot. We've done a lot of different types of what we would call storytelling experiences, from virtual reality to more of the traditional virtual tours, and Tapestry now is kind of this going beyond a traditional virtual tour, because you have all these other elements. You have the 3D model underlying the experience, but you also have these different voices and also other multimedia assets to tell that story. So it's really been an evolution of how we bring together that technical work that we do, and interpretive concepts.
When you're starting a new project, what is the biggest challenge that you envision? And then what's roughly what's a timeline on how long you can expect a project to take? I realize that's 2 separate questions, but they feel related.
Yeah, I think that the challenge sometimes is we do have this this balance between what is the story that people want to tell. You know, inherently all of our work is really place-based, space-based storytelling. And so, you know, we're balancing the objectives of the themes and narrative that the partners want to share with the technical limitations of what's possible to capture and to show this within the medium that we have developed. And so I think there's a lot of conversations around you know, focusing that narrative and then also focusing the scope into something that's going to work really well with the medium. You know, it's meant to be a web and mobile based experience. We really want people to come away, you know, after about a 10, you know, the core experience is usually about 10 minutes, which is a long time for a digital, you know, a platform, right? So we want to be able to hone that narrative down to something that can be delivered in that amount of time. And I think that tends to be a really challenging process, both from the technical capture side, but also from that narrative development. But when we have that really focused process, then you get these slices of the site. It's not the same as going on an hour, you know, in-person tour of this place. But you're able to access other types of media and things that you wouldn't have access to on site. And so I think we found that the parks that we work with, you know, it's very complementary to the work that they're already doing. So this is not meant to replace, you know, a physical interpreter on site, you know, leading a tour. It's really meant to access those audiences that are not making it out there, or providing this again like a pre-visit or post a resource for the people that want to learn a bit more, or maybe want to hear from people that they couldn't have spoken to at that place.
Paul, I know you had the part 2 question, but I'm really curious, Liz, I was just thinking about exactly what you're talking about. Like, is there any interaction between the CyArk products and in person? Like, is there any overlap, or is that a pre or post visit? And then is it sort of intertwined with what's going on? If you were to go in person, is there some symbiosis there, you know?
Yeah, I think it depends on the project. You know, we have several partners that are looking at incorporating the tapestry experience into an on-site kiosk. Because one of the things, again, accessibility for us is a huge piece, right? Whether it's people that cannot physically get to these places because of movement limitations, you know, how can this virtual experience provide, you know, an equivalent experience for them? So I think we're in active discussions around, I think, this on-site component meant to supplement what's happening. And again, you're probably getting access to different resources, whether it's through those voice clips, or there's multimedia that you can access during the scenes as well, that have, you know, maybe historic images or PDFs or stuff like that. So you can go much deeper within that experience. And then, you know, I think other ones, we've worked with some sites where, you know, they've maybe just completed their interpretive plan for the site, and we are able to have those discussions of how this virtual, you know, digital resource can complement what they're doing in person. That maybe the tour that we develop for Tapestry is actually quite similar to an in-person tour in terms of moving through the site, and thinking about, again, those kind of key messages and that narrative content that gets shared in the tour.
Is there a part of the world that you have not yet explored that you want to? Is there a place you really want to go and develop one of these virtual tours?
Oh, I think both Liz and I probably have our own personal
All right, let's hear
favorites. Maybe not where the organization wants to go, but
them. Okay.
maybe someplace we would like to go. I don't know, Liz, do you have a favorite?
I don't know. I mean, I think one of the most amazing things about our job is that we get to learn about these new places all the time. Like there are these things that come up where, you know, we're going to do a project in X country, and I'd never thought about going to that country before. And you know, you get this insight into this place, and I think that's like just incredible. So I don't know. It's such a big world out there. I don't know where I would want to do one of these next. I think
We do encounter unexpected places.
Yeah.
The, That is definitely one of the most interesting things.
What's the wildest food you have gotten to eat on one of your trips?
Wow. I had a snake and red ant soup
Wow.
in Laos. That was interesting. Actually tasty.
I was in Laos last year and nobody offered me snake and red ant soup.
No?
I love the crickets in Oaxaca. We've done some work down there in Mexico, and they it's like a appetizer. It's just like fried crickets with some salt, and
Hmm.
it's good.
All right.
I don't know how unusual it is. I feel like it's quite common there.
I had fried crickets in Myanmar, and I did not like it.
Oh, I really like them.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I was sort of wondering, like, are people coming to you, are organizations coming to you, or are you seeing things where you feel like there's a need? Because I imagine you're looking at the world in that sort of lens now, right? Like, what stories need to be told, and are we the best medium to tell them?
Yeah, I think we do, it's a mix for us. So yeah, people do come to us. They found out about Tapestry, and they're really interested in telling their story on the platform. So that does happen. And then sometimes we have, some existing partners that we work with and programs that we run with funding behind it that lets us, choose projects based on, the kind of constraints within the program. So I think we see both things happening, and it's really wonderful when people do come to us, because they often already know that story that they want to tell, and they're excited about the medium. But it can also be great when we approach different groups, and they maybe haven't thought about this yet, and it can really meet a need that they didn't realize they had.
And then I am curious about Paul's earlier question about how long these things take.
Anywhere between, I would say, on average 6 to 12 months from the beginning of a project, by the time we start talking about the early concepts, to getting permissions to work in the field, to doing the field work, processing the data, producing the final tapestry. From that to publication is probably anywhere between 6 to 12 months.
Well, obviously, it's such a pleasure for me to get to meet you and to speak with you in the context of the podcast. So looking forward to seeing you in person in St. Augustine, Florida. NAI, we are very grateful for your sponsorship of the conference. Without sponsors like you, it would be a lot more expensive and a lot more difficult to put on conferences for our members. So before people go to the conference and meet you in person, where can they find you online? Where can they find the work that you're doing?
Yeah, they can learn more about our organization at CyArk.org, CYARK.org. And then if you wanted to check out some of the tapestries that we've built, you can go to tapestry.cyark.org. And you'll have a nice list there to kind of browse. And we're equally excited to come to St. Augustine and meet and talk to some of your members, and we'd love to hear about what they think about virtual access and how to reach new audiences. And we're super curious to see what your members have to say.
And interpreters, that's what's up.